The next section, it builds off of what you just saw from Lindsay, and it is entitled Scripting and Formulas, presented by Ben Wake. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Brendan. So welcome back, everybody. My name is Ben Wake. I am the lead developer here at Quantrix for the desktop product, the Quantrix Modeler. And I've been asked to give a little something about scripting and about formulas. And given the depth and breadth of those particular topics, I have opted to focus my talk a little bit there. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are what scripts are, what they aren't, how to use them, that kind of thing, basics. And then I'm going to give that demo that Lindsay's been so politely teasing for how to automate some of the things that she showed you. And once I've done that, I'm going to talk about the infrequently used but somewhat powerful at-level meta function that is used in that filter. And so I'll motivate it by talking about another use case and come back and describe that. And if we have a little bit of extra time, I will move on and give a little bit more about scripts. If we don't, we'll move straight into the Q&A. So I'm going to start off by we've already seen a few simple scripts, but I want to back up a second and talk about what scripts are and maybe to a more important extent, what they actually aren't. Scripts are a powerful way to automate simple tasks in Quantrix. What we're going to show you later in this is about the most complicated script I could ever imagine writing. If you start trying to do things that are this fancy with scripts, you will run up against the fact that what you really want to do is talk to our sales team about our APIs, purchasing the QDK and getting your programmers in on that. And in terms of who should be writing scripts, the answer is, for one-line scripts, absolutely anybody. You've seen some scripts already that Brad and Lindsay wrote that absolutely dive right in, knock yourself out. You can use scripts to import, to update your imports. You can use scripts to change minor formatting, to add a few items, and you can certainly use them to open perspectives. Export to PDFs, once that becomes available in the next release, that kind of thing. Quick, one or two liners, things without a lot of logic or control. If you want something a little more complicated, you're probably going to want to talk to a programmer. Scripts are programming, and programming is hard. Granted, it's a little self-serving of me to say that. I want them to keep paying me, but programming does require some study, and it is a little bit complicated. And so when you're looking at this, if you're excited about it, if you're thinking, boy, I wish I had scripts in my model to do X, Y, and Z, the thing you should also be thinking about is, who's going to write that for me? Is there somebody in my organization who has the basic programming ability to get that off the ground, or should I be looking at some sort of solutions consultant? So again, absolutely dive in, whatever you're comfortable with. Just don't expect that you can produce really complicated scripts right off the bat all by yourself if you haven't done any programming before. So I went a little bit out of order, and I've already talked about the script capabilities. The kinds of things that I said, basic automated tasks, so I won't belabor that point. What shouldn't go in a script? That's a complicated question that I'm going to gloss over a lot of, but anything that's too calculation intensive, anything that takes too long a time, anything that too dramatically changes what Quantrix does, scripts probably aren't the best choice for that. We are going to have a feedback session later where we will be excited to get your input on what should go into Quantrix as it comes up. And if you want big complicated changes to Quantrix, either that or hiring somebody to write your own tools is probably the way to go. And then I'm going to continue on with my extremely brief slide deck first, but What I'm about to give is a demonstration of a sample script. The point of this presentation is not to teach you how to write a script, how to write a complicated script like that. It's to show off the power of scripts. It's to give you a demonstration for something that can be done, and indeed something that, as Brendan mentioned earlier, will be available for you. You will be able to download this script with a small amount of work, use it in your models if you want to have the kind of roll up, roll down filtering capability that Lindsay demonstrated in her brilliant talk. Once I've shown that script off, I want to talk a little bit about what it does on the calculation side, how we're calculating that filter, where it comes from. One of the things that we're doing in that script is the slightly complex use of the @level meta function. And if you've used that before and you're comfortable with it, awesome. I'm stoked for you. You may not get that much out of this section, but if you haven't and you work with groups or hierarchies, it may be a valuable tool to have in your back pocket for when you're trying to write your own formulas. And so I'm not going to answer these questions right now, but I'll talk about things like when you might want to use it and how you use it and what the parameters are for. And then I'll talk about what it's doing in Lindsays model. And so with that, I'm going to switch over to Lindsays model. Now, this is precisely and exactly where Lindsay left off, except that I've moved some windows around. This is just the same thing that Lindsay showed you with its already functioning summarization, roll up, roll down capabilities. It's got its chart, it's got everything. And so part of what I'm trying to show you here is that this script can function with an already wired up model. And so the first thing I'm going to do, and you won't be able to do this because you don't have it in your local repo, you'll have to bring it in from the web, but I'm going to import this script into here. And it takes just a second to load up. And before I fire off the script and wow you with all of the amazing things that it does, I want to make sure that you know sort of the 3 most important basic things you need before you can use this particular script. Thing 1 is you have to be in expert mode. I've pre-selected expert mode. This particular script is a complicated script, and it will not work if expert mode is unchecked. What is expert mode, you might be asking? And I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, but just briefly, you'll see that the script is organized into these chunks called methods. And they are a powerful programming tool. I won't get too deeply into exactly what they are, but if you have more than one method in your script, you have to go into expert mode. If you're not in expert mode, basically the contents of your script is the contents of the perform method. So again, the only thing you need to know is when you make your action, check this expert mode, and then you can paste the script in. Otherwise, you'll get yourself into trouble. Thing 2 is comments. Any line that you see in any script that begins with these 2 forward slashes, just like Brad discussed earlier with the formulas, that means this line doesn't do anything. It just provides words that you can read so you can better understand what's going on. So this, not part of the script, just an explanation. This, part of the script, very important. If you delete it, bad things will happen. And the third thing is the part that I just highlighted. In order to use this script in your model, you need to edit this script. You only need to edit these top 2 lines, but you need to edit them in the correct way. You need to tell it what matrix you're dealing with and what category you're dealing with. And you'll put those in standard Quantrix syntax, formula language syntax, enclosed in these pipe characters. You can just replace this part. And so in this particular model that Lindsay has already written, the matrix in question is this city data matrix. So when I'm ready, I'm going to change this to reference city data. Before I do that, I just want to really quickly show you what will happen if you don't do that. If I run this script as it exists right now, it says, hey, I don't know what view this imported data matrix is. Well, fair enough. There's no matrix called imported data matrix in your model. It can't work on that. There are ways to accept user input in scripts. It is a little more complicated. We decided for the simplicity of this demonstration that rather than ask the user when you run the script what matrix and what category you want, that we would just have you, the user, type it in directly. So if you start to type in here, you'll see that you get autocomplete, and I can put city data in here. And in here, I can put city data, or indeed any matrix that this category appears in, and the category is city. How did I choose that? The matrix is the matrix that I want to have these summarization formulas in. It's the matrix that's going to eventually end up as the bulk of my presentation. It's the one where I want to see the roll-ups by value. And what category? It's the category where I want all these total items to appear. It's the one that I want to roll up and roll down. It appears in this filter, but it also appears in this matrix. If it appears in multiple places, you can reference it here in any of those places. So, what does this script do? Well, you watched Lindsay very carefully and manually build this filter matrix, which she then used in here to accept user input and allow roll up and drill down. Fantastic. The problem is, this is complicated, but it's kind of what we programmers might call boilerplate. It looks the same everywhere, every time you do it. And so you can use this script to automate the process of creating or updating this, as well as inserting these total items for you and updating these formulae. Now, when you do that, one quick caveat. These formulas are thrown away and regenerated by the script. The script says, I know better than you. If you want something special in here, go put it in the script. These formulas, when I wrote this script, for better or worse, I intended as a jumping off point. If you had a different formula that you wanted to use here, say you wanted average instead, you can, and when you run the script, it won't step on that. What that means is, if you have the wrong formulas in here, the script also won't update them. So just be aware of that. That's a caveat for you. You could edit the script if you are a programmer or have one or have access to one to handle it more like this, to say, I want to throw away all of the existing formulas and put the new ones in. So maybe the simplest thing that the script actually does is, I don't know about you, but I don't love the feeling that when I click on this, it jumps up. And when I click there, it jumps back down. I'd much rather have all of these total items live up at the top. That's a simple enough thing, although a little bit tricky to do via script. And so one of the things that I put in the script is that it does that for you automatically. And so I'm going to fire off this script without making any other changes. And you're going to see that it doesn't break anything, I hope. And all of these totals move up. So I'm going to run that right now. And it takes just a second, but you'll see that this one, which I've moved up manually, is already there. But this one got moved up, this one got moved up, etc. Ooh, wow, it moved some items. Very impressive. Well, it does get a little more impressive than that. This script is designed to be generic in the depth of your hierarchy. And it's designed to be generic in the number of items and the size of the items. What this means is I'm going to show you a couple of scenarios where your data might change and the fact that the script can handle that. So again, I'm showing you what the script does first. If we have time at the end, I will then show you how to use this, how to read the script, I guess I should say. What the various portions of the script do in a little more detail. I'm not going to go over in detail how to write the script or exactly what the script does. So here I am in this import matrix that Lindsay has set up for us. And if I go back into the configuration, you'll see that there's this tantalizing region field in our data source. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's a little clearer what's going on. This region contains the fact that the state Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire all exist in the Northeast region of the United States, and Oregon and Washington exist in the Northwest region. And Lindsay and Brad showed you that you can group your hierarchy at one level. I'm going to show you that it works just as well to group it at a second level. I'm going to bring that in, and poof, again, it has automatically created these groups for you. What it hasn't done is automatically created totals for this. Those are things that Lindsay added manually. It has also, due to a fluke of how it brought stuff in, moved this total down, but that's no problem. Remember, I already showed you that the script will take care of that. The other thing the script will do is, when I run it, it will add a total item for the Northwest region, a total item for the Northeast region, and completely revamp this filter so that it handles all of those things. So I'm gonna edit out of here. I'm gonna set this up, and now when I run this script, boom, totals at the top, totals for everything, formulas for all of the totals, and it's added another item for level 3 and set up the filtered formulas. The proof, of course, is going to be in the pudding. If I want to summarize, say, the Northeast region, something I could not do at all before, I can. And so I can show you that. And because this one filter matrix is used for both, I have already filtered my chart in that way. If I want to drill down into Maine, the only important state, then I can summarize and look at Maine and drill down into the cities in Maine. And so here we have our totals and we have all of those, but I have collapsed up my Northwest region. So that's one example. If you change your hierarchy, you can use this script to update your filter. Another example, which is a little more subtle, and I'm going to simulate. This is all of the data in the file. But suppose something else came in, another state in the Northwest region, for example. And let's say that it's the state of denial, and it features the city's expectation and reality. So again, I'm mocking this up, but if you hit import and it brought in more stuff, the script would work fine with that. So let's say that the expectation was that we would get a whole lot of revenue. Make this just a little bit bigger so we can see it. And in reality, we ran at a small loss, and the expectation was that everybody would live there, but in fact, almost nobody does. You know how that kind of thing goes. So again, as you look over here, you'll see that denial doesn't have a total. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. You'll see that denial doesn't have a total and it doesn't have a total formula. But if I fire off my script, it adds in the total formula appears, denial shows up in my canvas, it shows up in my chart. Denial, expectation. One thing you'll notice may or may not have been obvious to you is that if you add this extra region, it can be hard to see all of them. So I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger and cram that a little bit tighter so you can see everything. And then if I go back into interaction mode, I can, of course, collapse my denial into total amount of denial. Or I can completely get rid of that section of it. Now, great, you're saying. You wrote a fancy script that works for this particular model. What if I wanted it to work in my model? Well, the answer to that is it can. And so what I'm going to do is show you absolutely from scratch a brand new model with no data in it, just a completely simple hierarchy. And I am going to import that script and pop it open. It's thinking a little bit. One thing you may have noticed is that, like Brad, I am running a version of Quantrix that is more recent than the most released version. I'm also running it live in a debug environment, which makes everything just a little bit slower. Oops, that is not the button I meant to click on. So again, in order to use this for your matrix, you are going to need to put your matrix name in here. So that's matrix 1. And in here, the category that I just set up is matrix 1B. Wonderful. Again, there's no data in here. I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. If there were data, all of this would work fine. If I run this, you'll see that not only did it fill in all of the totals, fill in all of the total formulas, it also created this filter matrix with all of the necessary levels and all of the necessary formulas. So I invite you, once we post it on the website in the answers forum, I invite you to download or copy this script and try it out in your models. If you want to try that kind of roll up, roll down, auto summarization, we're going to make that available to you. I would say that when you do it, remember that you will have to constrain the input and build your canvas and set up the filters. Scripts cannot currently work with canvas objects. One of the other limitations that I didn't really mention earlier is that scripts by their nature are somewhat limited in how they interact with Quantrix models. And that's by design. Again, if you're trying to do anything really complicated, you probably want to look into the QDK. But in the meantime, I just want to, that was really the thing that I wanted to show about that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about the formulas involved in that filter. And they look a little bit intimidating if you're not used to them. These use a select and they use this mysterious at level, and it's not entirely obvious what's going on there. And I thought that what I would do is build up a little bit of an example, starting with data that you know and love already from the previous presentation, but viewed in a slightly different way, because I'm going to show you a cool using as trick. I'm going to explain how to use the at level meta function, and I'm going to explain what the parameters of that at level meta function mean. So in this example, I have the same data, I have the same stuff, but I have chosen, in my own perversity, to try and roll it up to a different category. Rather than have a total item on each state, I want to get the values over here. Now that's pretty easy. I can say main equals the sum of raw data main. Perfect. I have my answers. And I can say, you know, Massachusetts equals the sum. That's not what you're probably going to want to do, because if you bring in more data, you have to write more formulas. It's kind of a pain in the butt. It's not ideal. So what you'd really like to be able to do is to somehow say, I want the values of this to correspond to everything in here by name. I want the values of this to correspond to everything in there. And so you might think, well, great. I would like to use a using as. And I'm going to just placeholder in here as state. Auto-filled in correctly. So using that, The problem is, what goes in the question mark? And the answer is, it's a little complicated. You can't just use city. You can't use an expression for that. You need to have some sort of list of values. And so the easiest way to do that is to add that list of values here. And then you can manually put them in. And if you do that, no problem. Your formula will work fine. Oops. As long as you get the syntax correct. Whoops, what did I do wrong here? Oh, this isn't for main anymore. This is for the whole matrix. And so this is actually working fine, as long as I go to the trouble of manually sticking in all of these state names. And that's what motivates this at level. I want to be able to automatically generate this. I want to be able to get the name of a group. At level gets you the names of groups. So I could say state names equals at level city, that's the name of the category, 1. And I will explain in a second what the 1 means. The important thing for the point of this demonstration is, poof, it did it. It filled them all in for me. That way, if I added another one, again, maybe the state of denial, etc., it's already filled in. I'm going to delete that because it was silly when I first did it and the joke is wearing thin. In any case, the whole point of this is I can use this to get me the names of these groups and I can put them in items. And that means that this is working fine. The thing is, it brought over state names here and it put state names in here. And that's not super great. For me, I would rather use a fancy using as trick, which you may or may not already be familiar with. And that is, I'd like to make a state names matrix. In my state names matrix, I want to do exactly what I did previously. I want to bring in this city, again, using the new fancy replace feature that Brad and Lindsay already showed off. And I'm going to take this formula and paste it in here, except that I'm not calling it state names. The matrix is called state names. Great. Now I have the names of the states associated with the city. What that means is I don't need it here anymore. But Ben, you might say, that has broken my formula. And the answer is, it sure has. But it's rescuable. I don't know whether everybody already knows that you can do this, but this term of the using as does not have to appear in either of the matrices that you're working with. As long as it can find a path, poof, it works fine. So it's using these state names to rendezvous these item names to these group names using this formula. I am happy to take questions about that at the end of this session. But having dispensed with that motivation, I wanted to talk really quickly about things, other things that this at level can do and what this 1 means. 1 means I want the level of group or item along this category that is the first thing on the left. I'm actually going to take away that category and replace it with one that I can change the hierarchy of at will. Call this hierarchy. Now, really quickly, an important thing to note, you do not want quotes here. You don't want double quotes. This is the name of a category directly. It is not a word. If you put a word in there, text, it will just get confused. If your category name happens to be a lousy one, you have to put the single quotes to indicate that it's got special characters such as numbers in there, but I'm going to undo that. So, as Brad pointed out, it has now helpfully changed the names of my items. You'll see that all of these say D11. The reason they say D11 is because D11 is the first level for each of these corresponding rows. If I add another one, which I'm going to call D12, say, this is going to be D12 because that's its first level. If I change this number to 2, then I get the middle level, level 2. If I change it to 3, in this case, I will get the item name. And so that's all well and good and great, but there are a couple of other things to know about this magical level function. One is, great, I want to count this way, I use numbers. What if I want to count this way? And I'm not going to do anything particularly exciting to motivate that right away. There are reasons you want to do it. We'll see one of them in the filter. But let's just pretend that you want to get the items. The items, and this isn't the most efficient way to get them, but the items are always at -1. The negative just means start from the right and walk this way, instead of start from the left and walk that way. So similarly, if I go to -2, I will get these middle things. If I go to -3, I will get the things over here. If you have a ragged hierarchy, it will more or less do what you might expect. Experiment, try it out, see how it does. That's if you only want one level of the hierarchy, but you can also get more levels of the hierarchy. Suppose I wanted to get the fully qualified name of this item, d11.d9.hierarchy1. And I wanted to put it in all of those. There's a special character that you can put in there called a star, an asterisk, and if you do that, it will say, give me the full hierarchy. Give me all of the group names, including the item name there. But you may want a portion of it. If you want a portion of it, you can give it a start and an end. So what I've done there is say start at 1 from the left, go to 2 from the left. Great. If I give you 1 from the left to 3 from the left, it will replace it. It says that's everything. Oh, I take it back. It won't actually replace it. Sometimes what you'll get is a replacement. Sometimes Quantrix thinks it knows better than you. But in this particular case, it didn't. So 1, 2, 3, it's giving you the whole thing. But I could also start further over, 2 and 3. The thing is, this is where the negatives really come into their own. Suppose I want for this to always be the item and the group of the item, no matter how deep it is. 2, 3 doesn't work. If I group these two items, now I'm getting 2 through 3 from the left. And that's why I'm going to ungroup this really quickly, show that this works anyway. If I want to start at -2, that's -1, -2, and go to -1, the items, then I get exactly the same results as if I went 2, 3, but if I add another level, now I'm still getting that. If I want to go out one more, I can do that. And crucially, and this is a little bit confusing, I admit, but in the filters we had to do this, you can mix them. You can say, I want to start at the outermost group and go to one more than the item, for instance. That's this, 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 this. That is at level. That's what it's for. That's how you use it. So let's take a look back here, and we're finally ready to understand what these formulas do. Again, remember that I said that this star represents all of it, the whole hierarchy. So let's start with just level 1. Level 1 is trying to tell you, is the total that is tightest to me, that's at my level, is that expanded or collapsed? So you can see in here that all of these went to 0 when I changed this to summary. That's saying these are collapsed. Similarly, if I change this one, it changes all 3 of those. That's the whole point of this formula. And it's a little bit tricky to make that work. And that's where the at level comes in. So what I'm doing with this formula is saying, hey, here I want the entire hierarchy. So for this cell, it would be any.me.Biddeford. That's what should show up there. I'm going to pop open the Dependency Inspector. If you're not familiar with the Dependency Inspector, that's Control-D, and it can be incredibly powerful for figuring out what is happening in your formulas, and if anything went wrong, if you're confused, it can often help untangle that mess. So if you hover over this, you can see that this is saying the full hierarchy of this is total. The full hierarchy on this row is northeast.total. That's the second item. I will hover there for a second so I'm not moving around. The third one is northeast.main.Portland, northeast.main.Biddeford, etc. So this part is saying, give me a full list of all of the full hierarchies for all of these rows. The second one is where it starts to get a little bit screwy. That's saying, for this particular row, I would like to get the hierarchy that starts at the outermost side, the leftmost side, 1, and goes to 1 above the items. So in this case, it would be 2, but if we had more items, it would be 3 or 4 or 5 if we had deeper levels of hierarchy. So again, I'm going to click on this, and what I expect to see here is any.me. Precisely. Right? So this is saying I want all of the hierarchies, and this is saying for this particular slice, I want the hierarchy starting at the beginning and going to 1 above the items. And why are we doing that? Because we're trying to say, give me all of these values, which are input value, this, give me all of these values where the complete hierarchy, any.me.total, is equal to my partial hierarchy plus total. And that's where this and.total comes in. So again, if I look here at Portland, it's saying go find the value for any.me.total because I want this any.me.total, and it's using at level to obtain that information. I don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to move on pretty quickly, but I do want to just say that level 2 does the same thing, but it makes it, instead of looking at your peer, it looks at your parent's peer. And level 3 looks at this grand total here, which is why it's so simple. And then the filter is my peer available and my grandparent, my parent, or am I the total? Because we don't want, when you pick summary here, we don't want to collapse this because then you can't uncollapse it. So that is my brief preface on using at level and what at level means. I wanted to come back and look at least quickly at this script and talk about what it does. I did my best to comment it. These values are very complicated. It's hard for a non-programmer to read this, but I just wanted to talk really quickly about what this script does. What it does is it takes a few inputs that you type into here. It makes sure that there are these total items, that they are at the top. It's doing that right in here. That the that any formulas that exist already in this part, in the matrix that you specified, don't get stepped on. That any ones that are missing get created, and then it makes this filter matrix. As you saw in the from scratch example, it will make it from scratch, and as you saw in this particular model, it will also update it for you. It will figure out how deep this hierarchy is. It will add level items as needed. It will set up all of these formulas for you, including these, which is an advanced trick. It is basically saying, for every one of these that I need, make that. And so I'm happy to answer not personal questions. I'm happy to answer specific questions from people about what this script is, how it works, how to use it, how to modify it for their needs. But that is perhaps beyond the scope of this talk. So if you see some glimmers here of how to make this into something that would be very valuable to you and your company, I'm happy to talk to you in particular. I'd like to reserve the Q&A for more general questions, if that's possible. Because I have just a few more minutes before we have to dive into the Q&A, I did want to show one tiny aspect of the ability to modify this script. So right up here, never mind how all this works, it's a little bit complicated, but what it's doing is saying, in the end, I want to make a sum summary formula for each of these values. Well, that's great. But what if you would prefer instead to do an average, as I showed earlier? Well, if you modify the script, put an average there instead of a sum, because this is doing it for all of them, it will change completely everything, all of these totals, to be average. So maybe total isn't a great term, and you could go into the script as well and change total, but you do have to make sure that you change it in every place that the script references it, because it's used in a lot of places. So I'm going to go back to here, and remember that I deliberately made it so that if you run the script, it doesn't replace formulas that already exist. So in order to make this work, I'm going to first delete all of those. I'm also going to delete that silly thing, which you'll notice broke this formula. That's fine. When I run the script, it will clean up all of these formulas for me. So I'm going to fire off the script, create the totals. You now notice that they all say average. You'll notice that it's cleaned this up properly. It has, oh, one thing I forgot that the script does, it can't set up the constrained input here, but it does set all of these to details. You could instead, and in fact, I will, I've got half a second. If I find the right place, you could instead say, I want to set them all to be summary. I want to start out completely collapsed. And so I'm going to run it again once it's finished compiling. I run it again, and it made no other changes. It just set them all to collapsed. So now I'm going to look back here, and we will see. Let's take up a little more of the screen. Let's lay this out a little bit differently. Sorry, Lindsay, for the sacrilege against your model, but I need just a little bit more room, I think. If we stop summarizing these, some of them, you'll notice that this isn't as tall, and that's because it is now the average of all of the values across here. And for instance, this is the average of all of the Northeast values, the summarized ones and the ones that you're viewing the details of. So I have now come quite hard up against time, and I would like to provide a moment for any questions that you might have put in the question and answer bar. And I've already pre-populated my helpful slide with a reminder that we will give you this script and this model for you to try out on your own and in your own models. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, at least briefly, and open up the floor. Yeah, Brendan, are there any questions?
Hey, Ben, I'm not sure if Brendan stepped away from his mic, but I've been scanning the Q&A section, and we do have a question from Franz, who asked about 10 minutes ago, could you auto-generate the categories items instead of typing them? And I'm not sure exactly which items he was referring to, but maybe you recall a bit earlier about, I think you were manually creating some items, and could they have been auto-generated?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. It is not possible to use our current category item generation feature to generate these total items because the category item generation feature either generates all of the items or none of the items. If you meant when I was typing in denial, for instance, I mean, the assumption would be that you wouldn't be typing it in. You'd be bringing it in from your data source. So maybe Franz can give a clarification as far as exactly what he was asking in the Q&A chat.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, I have another question, Ben, that was asked to me by Steve Bailey when we previewed this to him, and I think others might benefit from an answer to this question as well. When your script creates a sum summary for that total, does that total now have all of the characteristics that sum summary has for future calculations that you might do?
The answer to that is complicated, and I somewhat deliberately elided it. It has almost all of the characteristics. It is not a summary item, and so you'll notice that it does not show the little sigma that indicate, oops, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. It does not show if I made it. If Lindsay made it by adding a summary item, it shows a little decorator to indicate that it's a summary item. If the script added it, it doesn't. And that can have ramifications that are somewhat esoteric, involving things like timeline. For the most part, it's just about whether it shows the little sigma decorator.
Okay. Brendan, I think Brendan is back. I don't know if you want to say some of these other questions, or I could just continue.
Either way works.
All right, I'll let you do it, Brendan, because I'm up for the next session.
Okay. So we did have a follow-up from friends. It is for the summary example.
The summary example. Was that when I was showing the how to use at level? I don't understand what he means by the summary example. This to me was the summary example, and all of the items here are either generated by the script automatically or by the import automatically. In the other case, I was using an import to make the items, except when I was saying, just so that I can show you what's going on without having to go create and update and import, I'm going to type in something manually instead. Hopefully that answers this question, but if not, I'd be happy to go into significantly more detail about any topic you would like, in private correspondence after this.
Sure, thanks. So let's see, we had a comment here too from Tahir. Would be great to be able to expand and collapse all.
Expand and collapse all. That's kind of what we're doing here. I'm not sure what he means by all. The cleverest solution I've managed to come up with so far to adding dynamic expand and collapse is this filtering. Lindsay, did you have something you were going to say about that?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in there. I think, and to hear you can clarify too if this was not the case, but almost like if we could have a button per se on the canvas that would expand all of the totals to details, or flip it the other direction and have all of the totals to automatically turn to the summary value. So control all of the drop downs with a singular button rather than having to click them individually if we wanted to expand the entire table at once or collapse the entire thing at once.
that makes sense, Lindsay. Assuming that that's what he wants, I think it ought to be pretty doable. I just need to remember. Oh. Tried to get fancy.
Your mic got quiet there for a minute, Ben. I'm not sure if it's dislodged.
I don't have a non-external microphone. I may just need a trigger. Does that help?
It's a little bit better. I like the Iron Man script challenge here live to create that button.
So I have just done it. That when I clicked that, it did that thing. It looks a little ugly because of how I've set it up here, but you know, it would be just about as easy to add a collapse all here. So while I'm doing this, if there are other questions, I'd be happy to take those as well.
Great, thanks, Ben. There is another. It is, does this script work if we do not have unique items at the lower level?
It absolutely does. Yes, in fact, you may notice Portland, Portland. These are different Portlands. They have different powers of this grouping functionality.
Okay, we just got another one in as well. Would you consider in the future adding a native UI button to a group which would allow you to perform and expand collapse action on that group? It might use the summary item flag to exclude them from the collapse action.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? That was complicated.
Yes. Would you consider in the future adding a native UI button to a group which would allow you to perform and expand collapse action on that group?
Oh,
it might
gosh.
use the summary item flag to exclude them from the collapse action.
Not only would we consider it, we have been considering it. It is a thing that I am absolutely not allowed to make any promises about, but a thing that excites me, a thing that is already in our backlog for consideration and prioritization. So yes, great suggestion.
I'll just make the comment too that in the next section after this one, I'll go over the roadmap, and the one immediately after that will be a discussion, a voting, where members of this esteemed audience will be able to contribute to the prioritization for features, and that item is on the list. So it's one of those that, as Ben said, we've talked about. We love that idea as well. There may be more around that to do as well. To kind of natively support hierarchical data. So stick around and add your vote.
So to hear, I don't know whether this was more or less what you had in mind. We could certainly do something like this. We could also do a buttons to say summarize for me at the state level or at the region level or what have you. It is absolutely possible to build that kind of thing, and you'll notice that once we've built the entire framework, this is a pretty simple script. It really isn't that hard. All it's doing is saying, hey, make all of the values be summary. And it would be a little bit more complicated to say, make all of the values at this level be summary, but not that much more. So, and again, I feel terrible that at the hash that I have made of Lindsay's carefully laid out model. But are there more questions?
I think that covers it for now, Ben. Thanks.